another amazing day at fmtraining.tv. My name is Margaret. I'll be your broadcast engineer for today if we can get the camera to work. I'm here with the wonderful Calvin. Hey, Calvin.
Good afternoon.
So today we're going to be talking about a interesting topic. Today is going to be charting. Charting, I think, is one of the most commonly requested features anyone asks to put in their FileMaker database. But it's also not super beginner friendly, so today will be an interesting discussion. Hi.
Yeah, no panic, no panic. Everyone's cool. So I'm about 3 or 4 minutes late. I did want to make sure we promote the fact that we are going to be doing the idea of the design, understanding the design, the underhood design. What's the term for that we were using, Margaret? It was
data modeling.
Data modeling. That's right, data modeling, and then not only understanding data modeling. We're going to go through troubleshooting why your data modeling doesn't work. So we got on the phone with Centaur and understood her issues. And part of it was learning about data modeling in business, but then also understanding how to troubleshoot it because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. What do I do? How do I fix it if it doesn't work? Right. And so it's maybe useful to give you some ideas about how we solve the problem. They're pretty basic. But that's going to be an intensive week of data modeling and troubleshooting. And it's for everyone who, if you have to ask a question about anchor buoy, why we do it, or what TO goes where, or don't I need to join? If the words I join table come out of your mouth, you need to be at this live stream. Okay. Because that's like, you're a 5-year-old and you went to the teacher and gave her 3 F words back to back to back. You're going to get your mouth washed out with soap. That's the join. If you don't say the J word. Every time you say it, you have to pay $1 into the swear jar. So, Calvin, how are you today?
Doing good.
Yeah.
I ran into a join table in one of my apps that
it's $1. That's $1.
And I didn't call it join, but I gave it a terrible name, and I finally renamed it and gave it a good name.
Okay. But it's based on a business need or a business item, correct?
Right. Yeah. So it's something that we'd been working on for a long time, and so initially I just called it in FM starting point. I called it account categories because we couldn't figure out what they were trying to track.
Mm-hmm.
Now we finally decided we're tracking money, and we call it budgets.
Okay.
So that's really what it became.
The word join table comes up when business people go to tech people and the tech person doesn't understand the business fully, or maybe in Catherine's case, it was a business person who hadn't fully understood the subtleties of the business pieces of it and really drawn it out. And then you realize that somehow something's broke, something's screwed up, but you don't know how or why. And then, of course, the FileMaker community goes, "Oh yeah, just stick a join table and then it'll fix everything." So the road to hell is paved with people who don't know what the table is, and it's a join. So we're going to want to go through this for a week of intensiveness. Calvin, you're invited to that. I think having you around, you and I together work really good.
I enjoy it.
Just so I know, Calvin, we're going to pivot to charting, and I'm going to sneak away. I'd rather clean the toilet than do charting.
Oh no!
But you're gonna do charting, and the question I have is: we've done previous charting demos before. There is a limited capability to do charting within FileMaker itself. You can also use APIs to generate the data or to go out and generate the chart, bring it back. Just so I know what's happening with you today, what is your flavor? What are you doing?
Yeah, since this is a beginner or supposed to be a beginner conversation, I'm taking the FileMaker charting and just walking through how it works, how some examples of how you can use it, and then the steps I take to set up a new chart.
Okay, so the number one thing is, here's the deal with everyone. I'm going to leave this nugget with you. So in case Calvin doesn't say it this way, the number one liability with the FileMaker chart, the price is right, it's free, it comes with it. But if you have some of you are aware of these kind of customers. I'm in aviation, a little bit OCD, a little bit, but not super bad. I've met art galleries or other people who are artists. Nick is a classic example. When these people want to build an interface, they want it to look the way they want it to look, and anyone else's opinion doesn't matter because they know what they know. It's like telling Steve Jobs you can't have a Mac the way it is, and Steve Jobs fired everyone, screamed at him, and eventually got what he wanted, and he changed the world. Same with the phone. So there is a place for those people, but those people cannot be doing charts in FileMaker. Okay. So because the charts in FileMaker do basic things, and if you don't like the way they look, like you really want to customize the colors, no. You have color palettes you can choose from, but you can't really customize the colors, for example. So everyone needs to look at how it works and if your needs fit within the capabilities of the product. And if they do, then you can use it. But if someone comes in, well, I really think this should be a 2 points smaller font, move it over this way 3 pixels. And then this other thing over here should be this way, and then rotate the pie chart around this way. If you're doing any of that, you have to use something like Fusion Charts with JavaScript, which is a third-party product you buy. Then you get precision control over the charting, okay? So I'm going to let you do this, Calvin. Margaret,
Yes,
you ready,
sir.
guys, ready to roll? And
Yep,
I want to thank
good.
Calvin for the awesomeness that he is. It's very good. All right, Calvin, off you go.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Share your life with us. Tell us everything you've learned before.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is an example of what charting can look like in FileMaker, and I'm pretty proud of this chart. I think it's pretty good. And so let me just kind of walk through what there's a few things going on here. So I'd like to just kind of walk through what's going on this layout, and then we'll get into how it's built. So let's go into layout mode. So we'll notice here, these are actually just the summary information is fields. These are not charts at all. But then we have a chart here called states, a chart here, a pie chart called staff, another chart called types. So we've got a bar chart, 2 pie charts, and then we've got revenue by month down here that is the line chart. So we got, what is it, 4 charts going on here. And these are all pulling data from the invoices table. Now this is I think Margaret shared this file with you so you can look at it. But this is just an invoices table where I pulled invoices out of FM starting point and made this, which means that you should be able to copy this pretty easily into FM starting point if you want to use these charts. But it gives us a nice overview. We can see what states we're working with and which states are giving us the most business. We can see the staff, who's working and who's closing the most sales. And we can see the types here, where we're selling more products or services, and then we can see sales by month. So this is the basic setup of how these charts are, how we're displaying this data. It's all pulling from one table. But we're not referencing the table directly. So you can reference a table directly, but in this case, I'm going into the table, summarizing the information and putting it in these fields. And then the charts reference the fields. If we look at this, if right now we've got 569 invoice records, if we were referencing each of those in this chart, it would start running really slowly, especially if we were on FileMaker server and working over the wide area network. It's going to slow things down. But this, because we're caching the data in these fields, it makes it display really fast because everything's all in one record. And just to show you that how this is changing, if I manipulate any of the data here, then you can see that data change right away in the chart. So for example, let me just add a couple of zeros here on the second to last stat in the series 1. So that'd be our gross. And second to last is going to be May. And then as soon as I save this, you'll notice May jumped up. So as soon as I say refresh charts, the refresh charts runs a script that looks at the invoice data and then re-summarizes it and updates our chart information. It gets that back into place. So you'll notice each of these charts has a couple different fields. So we've got a states field that gives our labels and a states field that gives our stats. The same with staff. We've got the staff names and then the staff stats, and same with type, and same with our timeline with the months. And in the case of the timeline, we've got 3 series, 1, 2, 3, which is our gross, net, and cost. And so that's how we're structuring the data. Now, each of these is just a return delimited list of names and stats. And so line 1 in the names refers to line 1 in the stats, line 2 to line 2 in stats, etc. So that's how those are organized. And that's just a quick overview of how these charts are working. Let's go ahead and see how they're set up. So in FileMaker, we've got this charts option. That's a web viewer. This charts option, you'll see the bar chart there. You can create a new chart and go through this setup, and it helps you set up your chart. Let's go ahead and take a look at one that's already set up. So we can give it a name. And then we select what type of chart it is. And you'll notice what's really cool is even though I don't say view data, or even if over here I'm not saying, what is it, show sample data? Oh, it's under view, show sample data. That's not enabled. But if I do enable it, or even if I don't enable it, it should show me sample data, which it doesn't in this case. It did a second ago. That's interesting. So when I tell it not to show sample data, it shows sample data. Well, whatever. So here is, you'll see we're looking at our real data. We have California, Florida, New York, and 332, 130, and 107. And so here we can kind of go through our different chart options and see which one works best with our data and pick the one that we want, which is pretty cool. We're going to go back up to a column. And so here are different chart types. And then we can define our axis, the x-axis and the y-axis. Now, I don't have them labeled because I assume that you should know what this is, but we can call this one states, and you'll see this update over here. So we've got our states down here, and we can say sales numbers, and there's our sales numbers here. We go ahead and say save, and now you can see that. Now, in this case, it's probably more information that we want to see. I like charts to be self-explanatory, and so I'm going to remove those. So in here, we only have one y-axis, but you could put multiple in there. We'll show those later. You can say show legend. So this shows each item at the top, and that doesn't really work in this one, but you can, we'll show you it in another, in the line chart. And then we have our options for the X and Y axis. You can also switch these. We've got the swap axes here. And let's go to maybe a bar chart. Oh, that didn't help. Oh, we'll swap it again. It didn't work. So here's our different setups, and we can change the angle of these. So like Richard was saying, we don't have a lot of options for how something looks, but there are a few options in there. Under styles, this is where we change how we want it to look. So everything in this option and what we're using in this sample, everything is solid and flat. We could do shaded. We could do solid 3D, shaded 3D. Not a whole lot of options though. And then we've got different color options. Unfortunately, we can't say we can't pick which color we want for which column, which is unfortunate, but you can kind of pick a tone that matches what you most closely to your layout. We can choose some shading for the background, but I'm just going to stick with transparent. And we can show major, minor grid lines. I'll leave that there. And then this is an important one on the data source. So here, I have selected chart data, current record, delimited data. So this is that return delimited list. Now, if I said related, it would look through a relationship. And if I said current found set, it would look at all the records in the current found set. Now, in both looking through a relationship and using all records in the found set, there's some speed issues if you have a lot of data, or if you are on using the wide area network. So for me, I found it best just to use the current record data in a delimited list, having a script process that data and organize it so that it loads really fast. Go ahead and say okay. You'll notice our colors changed. So our color's a little bit different. Then that doesn't match the other one. So let me go back to, what was I think we used jewel tones. Okay. So do we have any questions about the setup on the chart before we look at another chart and look at the setup there?
Are the charts set on global variables on the data in those fields?
Yeah,
if not,
good
can
question.
Go ahead, sorry.
If not, what?
If not, can FileMaker use global variables in charts?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never thought. I don't think it could use. Let's look at this. Well, our data is a calculated value. Should we try it out? Let's try it out. So what I'm going to do is specify by calculation. I think that means we can. So I'm just going to call this one. I'll just give it the same name here. Chart state names. I just need to set that global variable. Chart state names. Let's go to our data viewer. And if you knew this, if you didn't know this, you can use a let statement to set a global variable or a local variable, which is pretty cool. Equals, and then I'm going to say California. I'm going to put them all lowercase so we can tell the difference. California, New York, and Florida. Evaluate. Okay. And say monitor. Now, oh, look at that. California, New York, Florida. So it is referencing a global variable. You could use a global variable. That's really cool. So usually I just have this reference. If we go back over to here, usually I'll just have this reference a field, but now we've discovered you can use a global variable. So that's an option as well. If you had two people using this, if you set this up in your app and you wanted two people to look at different sets of data or analyze different data at the same time, you would want to use global fields or global variables. And you could change this in this app. You could just go to the sample and change each of these to a global field. It will still work. And in this case, for the demo I didn't need to, so I didn't use a global field. But global fields or global variables would work. That's a very great question. We discovered something.
It's kind of a comment, so I'm going to read it.
Go ahead.
It may sound marginable charts produced in FileMaker can be right-clicked, copied, and pasted in PowerPoint presentations.
Yes, and you can drag and drop them too. So you'll see the plus button. I opened it. And now if I can, it saves it as a JPEG. And there it is, right there. You know what's interesting? Now that you mention that, thank you for pointing that out, because it wasn't something I was thought about talking about today. But one thing that would be interesting is could we script something like that? That would be a little interesting. I'm not sure that we can. Let's go ahead and look at our revenue by month chart. I'm going to jump into here. And what's different about this one, so you'll notice still we're using the delimited data. The style is about the same. But here we're using a line chart. Could do an area chart. That one looks pretty cool too. But one difference here is that we've got the y-axis and we've got three different sets of data. We're referencing three fields here. We give each one the name, and here we're just referencing each of those fields. In this case, I'm using repeating fields, but it wouldn't necessarily need to be repeating fields. And I am showing the legend here as well, so we know what each one of those is. So I guess what I want to point out here is how we have this set up. If we wanted to add a fourth series, we could add a fourth series and then specify whatever data we want in there and have it display. So let's just specify by calculation. And I'm going to say we're going to start off with a list, and then I'll just say 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then how many of these are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just do that again. So now that we did, so we showed what you could use a, what is it called? A global variable. And this time I'm doing the same, doing it with a calculation. So a little bit different there. Which is hard coded. So you wouldn't necessarily want to do it that way, but I just want to show how you can do a third series here. I'll delete that. Let's go back to, instead of an area, let's do our line chart again. One other thing that I have here is I have shown the different symbols. So there's a whole bunch of different symbols here that you can choose from and pick which one looks best or works with your data. I've got this gradient ball that looks very 90s or something. So there's some options, but not as many options as we would like. So I'm not going to dig too deep into this script, and I'll show you just 2 different scripts that are doing this. So essentially what I'm doing is summarizing the data using a calculation that uses execute SQL. Don't tell Richard I said execute SQL. So that's how I'm generating this data. But essentially what it's doing is summarizing. If we look at, I did put together another script here that just shows how you could do this without using execute SQL. So here I'm getting my list of states that I'm using and then going through a loop, performing a find, and then saving the find results in a list. And then at the end, I'm putting the state names and the state values into those same fields and saving it to generate those stats. So that's, we won't dig too much into that. The next thing I want to show is how I go about setting up a chart. So say you've got some data and you want to set up a chart. One thing I'll do, which is pretty interesting or pretty handy, is you can open up your table that you're working with in the table view. And if you go to this options arrow, there is a chart option right here. So you can say chart subtotal net. Say yes, let's do it. And so here it takes that data, and this is real data here, and it lets you go through this setup and create a chart based on whatever data that you have. And I find this to be a good way just to figure out what I'm looking for. And you'll notice here it's using current found set, chart display when layout is sorted by the individual record data. And so this process kind of helps you set it up. And this isn't where I'm going to end the whole, I'm not going to end my charting right here, but this kind of gives me, this gives me an idea of what I can do. So here I just sorted by the date. So you'll notice that the first one I just said chart, or actually, and it changes depending on what sort options you have. So I can just say subtotal chart by subtotal net, and here it is. But if I sort, let's see if this changes anything. It didn't. But if I sort by, say, product type, sort ascending, and then go to chart by invoice type, now you'll see that we've got, okay, product service. Could do a pie chart. Now this is one that we showed earlier. Now line chart, that doesn't really make any sense. We could do a bar chart. And so this kind of gives me an idea of what we might want to do with those. Let's go ahead and sort again by the date, and then say chart by invoice. So here we see this. Now the bar chart or the column chart probably isn't the best. Line chart, that's a little all over the place. That doesn't look great either. Scatter, that didn't bring up anything. Let's modify this and bring up another field. So I want the year, month, let's sort ascending and see if I can chart it like this. So here we're getting some data in there, but I don't know. So it's going by the count. So if we go, so different options here for sorting. Now, if I sort by two things, say let's sort by maybe staff name and type, what's that going to give us? Sort. I thought it was going to bring us some more options, but we see the count here. So once you create one of these records, or one of these charts, let's go ahead and create one. So here we have chart by invoice type, and by staff name. So here we see invoice type count, and then the staff name. So we see the count for each one of these. Let's go ahead and chart by invoice type. And so here we have our invoice type in columns. We'll leave that. And I will say save as layout. So when you say save as layout, it creates this layout, gives it a name. I'll say okay. And it automatically creates this layout and has it set up. One interesting thing about this is that it will have a script trigger associated with it that it automatically created. When you open up the layout, it runs the script. And what the script does is make sure the data is sorted in the right way so that this, so let's go to a different one so we can trigger the script. So it'll sort to make sure that the records are sorted in the right way so that the data appears correct. Now this isn't the final where I would end with this, but it kind of gives you an idea how the data can look. So here is one sorting by the date, and we can see the revenue for each one. And this was generated by FileMaker without me setting anything up, just through that quick assignment. So we've got the invoice type count, the bill to state, staff name. I guess I have another one by staff name as well. This one's a pie chart. So each of these were generated by FileMaker using the quick chart option right here. And so that was a really handy option for just kind of figuring out what the possibilities are. Now, do we have any questions about the quick charts?
Charts can be clickable? ?
Charts. Oh, so no, you can't really interact with the charts at all. It's more like a static JPEG that refreshes every time the data changes. You can drag and drop the image and save it somewhere, but it doesn't. You can't interact with it. There are some JavaScript libraries where you can have some interaction with the charts, and that works a lot. Gives you a lot more options, but it's a little more advanced. Any other questions?
I heard that you can make on-the-fly charts from formats in table view? ?
Yes, that's what we were showing just now. So the quick charts. So that's what we're doing when we select the options arrow and then going chart by date invoice. That's one of those on-the-fly in charts. Now, one of the things about those is that it's not necessarily it's one of the fastest ways to create the chart and to get your data see how your data needs to look. But I don't usually stop there. I take it to the next step so that we don't have to have all the sorting thousands of records to see the chart. So we'll look at that next. So the next thing that I'd like to look at is this cheat sheet. So what I will do once I get my data, or so usually I use something like this to determine what my goal is. It's like, okay, this is where I'm aiming for. How can I get there? And then I go over to my cheat sheet. And now this is set up using that same delimited list feature or setting like we're using here in my main demo. But what this is doing is it lets me kind of have a place where I can play around. So here you'll see I've got fields for each area in the chart. We've got my x-axis, my y-axis, and then we've got different series. And we can use these or not. So in this particular chart, this is a Kaplan-Meier curve that shows recovery rates over a certain number of years. So this is a chart that I built for it was for a study, a paper that was published based on the recovery rates of certain kinds of certain groups of patients with different therapies. And so you see that we start at 0 with everybody after their surgery, and then we see the success rate for each of these groups. After 10 years, Group A was still alive by 88%, but the blue group was down to only 50% survival. So this is, but what helped me here was that I set all these fields up, and then I could mess around with the data and make sure that it looked right. Now you can also, this is all the real data here, and I can switch these around and see what makes sense. Well, these definitely don't make any sense. That doesn't help people understand the data, but the line, that is helping us understand the data. So let's go ahead and look at the next one. Now, another thing is that the way I have this set up is you can take one chart and jump through different kinds of data to see. So I've got 4 different data sets here to look at. And you'll notice that first one only really makes sense with the first record. Let's go to the second record and the second chart. So here you'll see the sales chart. And so we've got our sales over time. And you'll notice that really follows this chart over here pretty closely. In this case, I'm not using the area, I'm using the line graph, and this one's the area, but it's very similar. And we can keep messing around with this and put in a title, sales over time. And this so we've got our sales over time here. And then we've got our 3 series. Again, if I switch to the data, most other records don't really make sense on this particular one. Let's go ahead and move to another. Here's a pie chart. Now, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with this record, but when I switch over to this one, which is matches the chart over here, we'll see that we have our staff and those stats for each one, and we can see how that pie chart kind of works together and how the data worked out in this case. And then the final chart is a bar chart. So in this case, I have 3 series of data here, but I'm only using 2. So if I wanted to, I could just jump in here, say I want another series of data, let's put it at the bottom, and we're going to specify by a field name. We're going to say series 3 data, and this can be field name, series 3 title. And now we've updated it to be 3 series. And I would just need to put some data in here. So we're going to put 20, 30, 40. As soon as we save that, now we have our data in there. And it's updated. So let's change this to something. Let's change that to 25 so that 25, so it's not even with the other one. So now we just switched it to a 3 series bar chart. And so this just kind of gives us a playground to mess around with these charts. Often what I'll do is just copy each of these fields into an app and import the records so I can mess around in the new app with all the different charts and all the different data sets that I have there. So that's just how we work with these. And I've got a chart 5. I'm not sure. I guess this is a bar chart, and it pretty much works with the same data. Let's go ahead and put a legend on this. Try this again. Okay, show legend. Okay, so there's our legend. Looks like our legend isn't referencing. Let's add one more here. This is the Y series title. Is that the right one? Anyway, but so the handy thing about this is that it gives us just a place to play around with these different charts, and you can experiment with the data and see how you want your chart looking. Do we have any follow-up questions on the chart setup?
With cheat sheets, how can I indicate variations of P? Question mark.
Variations of P?
Deviations of P. Excuse. So,
like deviations of the data?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, you could have different records. So because we can look at each record in the same chart, we can duplicate this record. So this is now number 5. And then we can just put in our data to match what we're expecting. So maybe we're expecting this to be all hundreds. And so now it's going to look, oh, we removed that 3rd series. Let me add that series back in. We'll say, which is this one? Just cancel. This is series 1, Y series 1 data. So let's just go ahead and do calculation. Y series 3 data. I'll say Y series 3 title. So now we're testing that data with another set of. So we got two different records that could be 2 different sets of data that we're examining that on and seeing how that looks. So that's how I would try with different records. I would put in the different data and see how it looks, those different variations. Good question. Any other questions?
Taking the info from a virtual list, question mark.
Yeah, so you could use a virtual list to populate this data. Now, technically, this is a kind of virtual list because we're creating the list in a field. But you could definitely use a virtual list to summarize your data and then either reference it directly, like we're doing over here, referencing the table directly, or you would save that data into some kind of field like this and reference it. Sometimes virtual lists is just data in a global variable. So you could use the calculation feature and reference the data in the calculation by going to, if we open up this, saying calculation, and then referencing that global variable that's holding all your data, and maybe a calculation to parse out which data you want to use. Yeah, you got a lot of options in there with a virtual list. If a virtual list is going to make it faster, you definitely want to use that.
This question may be for more advanced uses, but is there a way to set an n number of series charts within FM?
Is there an end number on a series of charts?
Is there a way to set an n number on a series of charts within FM?
Next number?
I think that's what it's. I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, a limit to the chart.
Yes.
I'm not following exactly what you're looking for practically. So you could do, if you're going to do a limit on the data, I would probably do that through the scripting that somehow, whatever scripting we're going to use to generate this data here, I would use that. And obviously if we're displaying different sets of data by different searches, you could have, if the search includes 3 series, you could have it display a 3 series chart, while if you don't have that many, you could have that one hidden and only show the 2 series that you want. Any limitation on the data I would set up in the script itself, though. I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure that I understood it 100% though.
Okay. Yeah, he says, I mean deviation of P as in medical studies, but never mind.
Oh, so as far as medical studies, I don't necessarily understand all the data. I just took the data and put it in what is it? I put it into charts and analyzed it, but I didn't necessarily understand it. I read the papers that I worked on, but I kind of didn't really understand them a whole lot since I'm not a doctor.
I'm muted, of course, which means I'm talking while speaking. Nope, I don't. I'm just saying I don't think there's any other questions. So.
Okay. So what we could do now is maybe take a look at our data over here in our last few minutes and see if we can just create a new chart. So let's go ahead and see what other data we have in here. I think I just imported this all from FM starting point. So maybe there's a little bit of data we can analyze. So let's do we have a creation? A person who created staff. Let's see our staff name. I guess staff name's already in there. So that staff name was something we worked with already. Let's see, maybe let's sort by staff name. And actually, so let's try this. Let's go ahead and take our cost. Let's do this. So let's put our cost in here. And would that be subtotal cost? And I think this is a calculation. Let's just look at our cost. Oh, looks like we don't have, it's not a calculation. So we've got our grand total, our subtotal net, and our subtotal cost. So let's go ahead and we're going to add a new field and just call it cost. Oops. Cost with a T. And what I'll do with this, just to generate some data, is I'm going to just have this as the subtotal cost and put it in a negative. So, okay, we'll replace it. So now we've got a negative value for each cost. And my goal though, is I want to see the cost as a negative number versus, so for here, I see the cost as partially on this as a positive number, but I want to see it as a negative. That might be a little more interesting. So let's go ahead and sort by this. And let's try to see if we can get a calculation. And so let's grab our data. And let's see if we can grab cost in here. That doesn't look quite right. Maybe we mess around with this a little bit. How does that look? I don't know if that looks good either. That probably doesn't. Let's go ahead and cancel. So what I want to do here, let's go ahead and duplicate this chart over here. So we'll do this one. And actually, I want to duplicate the layout. And so this is kind of the same. You'll notice that this is the same basic data as our line chart over here. So I'll select duplicate. So I've got a new record to work with. And I'm going to call this one. I'm going to duplicate the layout as well. So I duplicated my record and I duplicated the layout as well. I'll call this one chart 6. We'll open it and we'll go to record 6. This is the one that we want. And maybe let's reference this data here. Let's do our series 1. Since this is right from our right from this chart. So now we can kind of see what that data would look like here. And so we're back to that line graph though. Let's make all of these negatives and see what that does. Okay, so that's a little interesting. We've got this negative. Now let's jump in here and change it to, I want this positive and negative columns. And so we go to browse mode. Now interestingly, we're not getting any positive and negatives. So maybe I should have tried this. So show legend title. So there's our data. So as we mess around with this, we can kind of, so we see we do have, well, what we do have right. We do have our months. Our months are looking good. But we're not getting the series kind of information here that we're looking for. It looks like it's only referencing one series. So maybe what we have to do, what if we put in some negatives in here? So what's nice about this is I'm messing around with data in the record. So there we go. So we see positives and negatives in our data. We can figure out what we're wanting. So one thing we figured out is that the positive and negatives don't do multiple series. It has to be one. So maybe this is the overall income, whether if we're coming out positive or not on these. And maybe overall, sometimes the cost is more. We could change the cost so it's greater and we can see these negatives. And that gives us a little more information. But you'll see that by giving us a little playground, this little area that we can play with this and select how we want these things to look, gives us the options to figure out how we want these things to look, and it gives us some options, and people play around with those a little bit. Do we have any follow-up questions about using the cheat sheets and trying out a new chart?
Not at the moment that I can see. There's kind of like a conversation happening, but not so much like questions per se. Just like, here's a comment for a basic user. If you haven't covered it already, it could also be useful to learn that FileMaker is possible to create temporary sums/totals in table view. So
in table view. So I guess they're talking about sub-summaries in the table view.
But can't you put sub-summaries anywhere?
It's a little different in the table view, but I don't actually use that too often because usually in the table view, I don't really want to, usually I'm just looking at all the data. I don't really manipulate it too much in the table view. But yeah, you can do some sub-summary stuff in the table view, which is handy to look at. If we want to try that out, say sort ascending. So then you can say add group. So here's our group. And there would be more. So we can do a running count. So there we've got our count of records in each of these, 364. And is this? 205. Usually I don't want to do summaries in a table view just because it can make things really slow, but it's interesting to know that what options are there. Thanks for pointing that out. Anything else? I believe Margaret shared this file with you, so you can test it out.
There was
if you use FM starting point, you can most of the invoices table should match the invoices table in FM starting point, so you should be able to copy and paste most of this in without it breaking.
Yes, absolutely. So cool. Thank you very much, Calvin. Seriously, this has been awesome. Yeah, I was waiting for like a second to see if any questions are like drift in. Nope. A file has been shared. Please download it as you want to use it. Thank you again, Calvin, for coming today and presenting on this topic. I know it can be a complicated one. I hope all of you have a lovely day. Bye.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!